They all laughed at his broken briefcase. A sword would have been more useful, they joked. Then space itself started screaming. Every weapon died. Every computer crashed instantly. They all laughed. Something impossible was crossing over into our reality. What happened next? What happened next changed the galaxy forever.
The Galactic Tech Summit on Nexus Station was basically the universe's biggest flex competition. Every species brought their hottest new gear, showing off like peacocks on steroids. I'm talking weapons that could crack planets, shields that bent physics, AI systems that made you question if consciousness was even special anymore. My name's Vextor, and I've been covering these summits for the past 2 centuries as the lead defense correspondent for the Interstellar Military Review. Seen it all, documented it all, and honestly, most of it's just the same crap with new paint job, new energy signature here, improved efficiency rating there. But fundamentally, we've been fighting the same wars with incrementally better tools for millennia. But this year was going to be different, and not in a good way. The main exhibition hall was packed wall-to-wall with delegates. Literally thousands of beings from hundreds of species, all crammed into a space designed to showcase the absolute pinnacle of military innovation. The air recyclers were working overtime to handle the mix of atmospheric requirements. Translation matrices hummed at maximum capacity, converting thousands of simultaneous conversations into comprehensible data streams. The Corvus Collective showed up with their new quantum disruptor cannons, beautiful pieces of tech that could phase shift projectiles through multiple dimensions, allowing them to bypass shields and strike targets from angles that technically didn't exist. They'd spent 40 years and probably half their GDP developing them. The demonstration video showed a test firing that punched through 6 layers of reality to hit a target that was, by all conventional measurements, in a completely different star system. The Silvari brought gravity well generators small enough to fit in your palm but powerful enough to crush a starship into a sphere the size of a marble. Their lead scientist, a being of pure crystalline structure that sang rather than spoke, explained how they'd managed to stabilize microsingularities using harmonic resonance patterns. Absolutely cutting-edge stuff. Even the usually humble THRYNN unveiled neural link combat systems that let their soldiers share consciousness in real time. Imagine 40 warriors operating as one mind, anticipating each other's moves, sharing sensory data instantaneously. They'd cracked the ultimate teamwork problem, literally becoming one organism during combat. Standard impressive stuff for a summit like this. I'd seen similar innovations before, just never all at once with this level of polish. My tentacles were getting tired from all the note-taking, and I was already composing headlines in my head. Corvus pushed dimensional warfare to new heights. Silvari miniaturized apocalypse. That sort of thing. Then the human delegation walked in, and I swear to God, the entire room went quiet for like 3 seconds before erupting into barely contained snickering. The human representative was a scrawny-looking dude named Dr. Marcus Webb. Looked like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. Probably spent all his time in some basement lab. Pale skin, dark circles under his eyes, the kind of build that suggested his idea of exercise was walking to the coffee maker. He was wearing what appeared to be a vintage Earth military jacket. The kind you'd find in a museum, complete with faded insignia and patched elbows. His pants were standard civilian work, were scuffed boots that had clearly seen better days. And he was carrying a metal briefcase that looked like it had survived a war. Thing was dented, scratched to hell, covered in what looked like carbon scoring from energy weapons, and had actual analog locks. Not biometric, not quantum encrypted, not even digital. Literal, tumbler, locks. The kind you could pick with a bent piece of wire if you had 30 seconds and basic manual dexterity. Is that thing from the pre-digital age? Chittered Ambassador Zwikes out beside me, his mandibles clicking with amusement. The crystalline being's entire body was basically a walking supercomputer, capable of performing calculations that would crash most AI systems. To him, analog technology was like watching someone try to do calculus with an abacus. Looks like he pulled it from a 20th Century War movie, I muttered back, already composing the snarky headline in my head. Humans bring antiques to Tech Summit. Federation questions their readiness. Maybe add a subtitle about humanity's concerning nostalgia complex. The other delegates were having similar reactions. The Corvus were hissing with laughter, their scales rippling with chromatic amusement. The Silvari's crystalline structures were refracting light in patterns that indicated extreme mirth. Even the normally stoic Grax were emitting ultrasonic chirps of derision. Commander Draxo, the hulking Corvus military chief, approached the podium with his usual swagger. 8 feet tall, covered in scales that shimmered like oil slicks, for arms capable of crushing steel, and a reputation for never backing down from any challenge. He'd personally led the assault on the Crithian rebellion strongholds and come back with more medals than most species had wars. His voice boomed through the translation matrix as he addressed the crowd, each word dripping with condescension. Esteemed delegates, today we witnessed the pinnacle of modern warfare technology. Each species here represents the cutting edge of innovation, the absolute peak of scientific achievement. He paused, his reptilian eyes fixing on Marcus with barely disguised contempt. Well, almost each species. The room burst into laughter. Even some of the human delegation looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. I noticed a few younger human officers trying to avoid eye contact with their peers from other species. One of them, a lieutenant with fresh academy badges, looked like she wanted to melt through the floor. Marcus just stood there, calm as fuck, his hand resting on that beat-up briefcase. He didn't fidget, didn't show embarrassment, didn't try to defend himself. Just waited with the patience of someone who'd been through this exact scenario 100 times before. Dr. Webb, Draxo continued, his voice now sickeningly sweet in that way bullies use when they pretend to be nice. I see you brought something. Please enlighten us. What exactly is humanity's contribution to this summit? A historical artifact? A paperweight, perhaps? Or is this some kind of performance art meant to remind us of simpler times? More laughter, louder this time. I hate to admit it, but even I was grinning, my respiratory slits fluttering with suppressed amusement. Humans had only been in the Federation for about 30 years, and while they'd proven themselves decent fighters and surprisingly creative engineers, they still treated tech like it was something to be nostalgic about. Always going on about backup systems and analog redundancy, like they expected the entire galaxy to just stop working or something. They had this weird obsession with mechanical watches, vinyl records, paper books, physical objects they didn't need but kept producing anyway. The rest of the galaxy had moved past materialism centuries ago, storing everything digitally, experiencing everything through neural interfaces. But humans, they still built libraries, still printed newspapers in some colonies, still insisted on keeping physical controls in their ships just in case. It was charming in a primitive sort of way, like watching a species that hadn't quite figured out how to let go of their evolutionary security blankets. Marcus stepped up to the podium, set the briefcase down with a heavy thunk that echoed through the hall's acoustic systems, and looked out at the crowd. His expression didn't change. No embarrassment, no defensiveness, no anger at being mocked. Just this quiet, tired look that reminded me of old soldiers I'd interviewed over the years, the ones who'd seen too much and stopped caring what others thought. When he spoke, his voice was steady, measured, with a slight edge that suggested he was choosing his words very carefully. This, he said, gesturing to the briefcase, is a resonance detection and stabilization array, or as my grandfather called it, an RDSA. We've been building them for about 400 years, give or take a decade. My family specifically has been involved in their construction and deployment for 6 generations. For 100 years? ZYXL whispered to me, his crystalline structure vibrating with confusion. That would place it during their early space exploration era. They barely had FDL capability then. Primitive by any standard. I nodded, scribbling notes. This was getting better. Not only did the humans bring an antique, they were proud of it being an antique. It's designed, Marcus continued, ignoring the murmurs spreading to the crowd like ripples on water, to detect and respond to what we call void incursions, tears in the fabric of space-time that allow entities from non-standard dimensions to cross into our reality. These entities exist in states that violate conventional physics, operate under rules that contradict everything we understand about matter, energy, and causality. The room went from amused to confused. Several delegates exchanged glances. The THRNN's neural link started flickering, a sign they were rapidly sharing information within their collective consciousness. Try and make sense of what they just heard. Void incursions? Draxo repeated, his tone mocking but with a hint of uncertainty creeping in. You mean theoretical quantum anomalies? The kind that exist only in mathematical models and paranoid science fiction? The kind that half a dozen species have proven mathematically impossible? No, Marcus said flatly, his eyes never leaving Draxo's. I mean actual tears in reality that let things through. Things that eat, corrupt, and destroy everything they touch. Things that our ancestors encountered about 6 centuries ago and have been fighting ever since. Things that killed 3 billion people before we figured out how to detect them, let alone fight them. Dead silence for about 2 seconds. Then someone in the back started laughing, and it spread like wildfire. Within seconds, the entire hall was howling. Some species were literally slapping their appendages on tables, their equivalent of knee slapping. The Grax were emitting subsonic frequencies that translated as hysterical wheezing. The Vorthian delegate actually fell off their hovering platform, their gas-sack body undulating with mirth. Oh man, I chuckled to ZYXL, wiping moisture from my optical sensors. The humans brought a ghost detector to a weapons expo. This is going to be my best article in years. Maybe I'll win another Stellar Journalism Award. Species bring superstition to Science Summit. It writes itself. 3 billion people. ZYXL managed between crystalline chimes of laughter. They actually put a number on their fictional threat. That's commitment to the delusion. Marcus waited for the laughter to die down. When it didn't. When it just kept building and building until the acoustic dampeners had to kick in to prevent structural resonance, he just shrugged and popped open the briefcase. The laughter cut off like someone had flipped a switch. Inside was the weirdest piece of tech I'd ever seen, and I've seen some weird shit. I've documented weapons that existed in 5 dimensions simultaneously. I've reviewed defense systems that operated on negative time scales. I've analyzed devices that functioned by making reality doubt itself. But this thing? This was different. It looked like someone had taken vacuum tubes from the 1950s, crystalline circuits from Silvari's most advanced computers, mechanical gears and springs from some steampunk fantasy, and some kind of organic neural tissue. I'm talking actual biological matter, and just mashed them all together into one impossible device. There were dials with analog needles pointing at handwritten labels, switches that looked hand-carved from some kind of bone or wood, tubes that glowed with their own light, but couldn't possibly have a power source, gears that turned but weren't connected to anything, and at the center, this pulsing core that seemed to shift between solid, liquid, gaseous, and something else entirely, states of matter that shouldn't exist. The core was about the size of a human fist, and it was breathing. I'm not being metaphorical. The damn thing was expanding and contracting like a lung, and with each pulse, the circuits lit up in sequence, following patterns that hurt to look at directly. The hell is that? I muttered, my journalism instincts warring with sudden, primal unease. It's beautiful, breathed one of the THRYNN scientists, suddenly serious. Their neural link had gone completely still. 40 minds united in singular focus. That's hybrid state matter. We've theorized about it for 2 centuries, but never successfully manufactured it. The energy requirements alone should be impossible. And that organic component, is that terra neural tissue? Modified human neurons, yeah, Marcus confirmed, his hands hovering protectively over the device. Specifically cloned from the original creator cell line. My great-great-great-grandmother, Dr. Sarah Webb. She figured out that conventional computers couldn't process void data without crashing, but organic neural structures could. They just interpreted the impossible as another form of sensory input rather than trying to rationalize it. That's absurd, Draxel said, but his voice had lost its mocking edge. He was staring at the device with the expression of someone whose entire worldview was starting to crack. How would you even begin to construct something like that? The precision required, the impossible physical states. You can't manufacture it using standard processes, Marcus interrupted. This requires what you call impossible conditions, simultaneous quantum states that collapse under observation, temperature extremes that exist at the same point, pressure gradients that shouldn't be possible in 3-dimensional space. He ran his fingers along the device's edge with obvious affection, the way someone might pet a loyal dog. My great-grandmother figured out how to build these in conditions of zero observation. Literally. Had construct them in sealed chambers with no sensors, no cameras, no conscious observation of any kind. The construction process involves what she called blind faith engineering. You prep all your components, seal them in the chamber, activate the assembly sequence, and pray. Then you wait 72 hours and open the chamber. That's absurd, Draxel scoffed, but he was leaning forward now, unable to look away. How would you know if you succeeded? How would you replicate successful builds without observation? Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was a smile of someone sharing a dark joke. You open the chamber and check. Either it worked or it didn't. Either you've got a functional RDSA, or you've got a mass of melted components and wasted resources. Success rate is about 1 in 50. We've been doing it for generations because we don't have a choice. Because when the void cracks open, all your fancy quantum computers and neural networks just stop. They can't process what they're seeing. Their sensors can't reconcile the data. They try to rationalize irrational, and they crash. Hard, sometimes permanently. He carefully lifted the device from the briefcase with both hands, and I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. Not from nervousness, from weight. The thing couldn't have been more than 30 pounds based on its size, but he held it like it was made of lead or depleted uranium. His arms strained, muscles standing out on his neck. This device works on principles that predate digital computation. Analog, mechanical, biological, and something else. Something my ancestors learned from the first void breach. It doesn't try to understand what it's detecting. It just responds. When reality tears, it feels the tear like a physical wound. When things cross over, it locks onto them through resonance rather than conventional targeting. And when we need to push them back, it provides the resonance frequency to do it. Not through calculation or computation, but through sympathy, like matching a tuning fork's vibration. The hall had gone quiet again, but this time it wasn't amused silence. This was the silence of people starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they'd been wrong about something important. Fascinating story, Draxel said, his patience clearly wearing thin, though I detected uncertainty in his voice now. But stories don't win wars, Dr. Webb. Technology does. Proven, tested, reliable technology. Not folklore wrapped in gears and tubes. Not superstition disguised as science. You're right, Marcus agreed, and set the device down on the podium with surprising gentleness. So let's test it. Right here, right now. Let's see which of our approaches works better. That got everyone's attention. The murmuring stopped. Every optical sensor, audio receptor, and sensory organ in the hall focused on the podium. Test a how? Draxel demanded, his forearms crossing over his massive chest. There are no void incursions to detect, because they don't exist outside of human paranoia and your species' documented tendency toward pattern-seeking behavior in random data. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a small data chip, the kind you buy at any electronics market for pocket change. He held it up between his fingers. This contains sensor logs from 17 different human colonies over the past 60 years. Each one recorded anomalous readings matching void signatures 72 hours before major spatial distortions occurred in those exact locations. Temperature fluctuations that violated thermodynamic law. Gravity wells that appeared and disappeared without mass. Light, bending in ways that suggested space-time, was literally folding. Readings that made no sense to conventional instruments. He slid the chip across the podium toward Draxel with a flick of his fingers. It skittered across the polished surface and stopped right at the edge, almost falling off. Each colony was evacuated hours before the breaches occurred. We've been tracking these incidents, predicting them, and preparing for them while the rest of you assumed your sensors would warn you of any real threats. We've saved approximately 400 million lives through early detection over the past 6 decades. No recognition, no thanks, because nobody else even knew the threats existed. He met Draxel's eyes directly, and I saw something in Marcus's expression that made my scales itch. Absolute certainty backed by hard experience. Check it yourself. Run it through your best analysts. Have your AI systems examine every data point. Cross-reference it with your own spatial anomaly records if you keep such things. Then tell me if you still think this is folklore. Tell me if you still think 3 billion dead is a made-up number. Draxel picked up the chip, like it might explode. For a moment, he just stared at it, his expression unreadable. Then he handed it to one of the subordinates with a curt gesture. Analyze this. Full spectrum review. I want results in... The station's alert klaxon started wailing. Every screen in the exhibition hall flickered and died. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. My personal data pad went dark in my appendages. ZUI-XL's crystalline body, normally glowing with constant internal processing light, suddenly dimmed to almost nothing. What the hell? Someone shouted. Then several more voices joined in, creating a cacophony of confusion in multiple languages and frequencies. All digital systems are offline, reported Silvari technician, panic creeping into their crystalline voice. Primary, secondary, and tertiary backups, all unresponsive. Quantum computers showing recursive failure. AI systems entering safe mode. It's like something's jamming every electronic frequency simultaneously across all spectra. That's impossible, Draxel growled, but his voice lacked conviction now. This station has quantum-shielded systems, military-grade protection, triple redundant power supplies. Nothing can jam them all at once. The probability of simultaneous failure across independent systems approaches zero. Marcus was already moving. He'd pulled his device from the briefcase and was adjusting dials with practiced precision, his fingers flying over the controls with the speed and accuracy of someone who'd done this thousands of times. The analog needles were going crazy, swinging wildly across their scales, slamming against the maximum markers and bouncing back. "It's not jamming," he said quietly, his voice somehow cutting to the chaos like a knife through silk. "It's presence. Physical reality doesn't know how to process what's coming, so it's shutting down anything that tries to measure conventionally. Your digital systems are crashing because they're trying to reconcile impossible data, information that violates the fundamental constants they're built on. They're not broken. They're protecting themselves from something that would fry their circuits if they try to process it." The needles on his device suddenly locked into position, all pointing the same direction with mechanical precision, toward the station's outer hull. "Section 7 Delta," Marcus called out, his voice sharp and commanding now. "External sensor array, junction point between modules 7 and 8. There's a weak point in local space-time integrity. Microfractures in the dimensional membrane. Has been developing for about 17 minutes and 40 seconds based on these readings. You didn't notice because your sensors can't detect this kind of degradation. They're looking for mass energy readings, particle signatures, conventional spatial distortions. This is deeper. This is reality itself starting to tear." "This is insane," Draxel started to say, but then the station shuddered. Not like an impact, not like an explosion or a collision, or any kind of conventional force. This was different, a wrongness that made my inner ear freak out and my equilibrium fail. My sense of up and down inverted for a second, then twisted sideways, then stopped making sense entirely. Several delegates collapsed, their sensory organs unable to process what was happening. Others clutched their heads or equivalent body parts, crying out in pain or fear, or both. I grabbed onto my chair and held on, fighting the urge to vomit. Beside me, ZYXL had gone completely dark, his crystalline structure fractured by stress lines I'd never seen before. Through the station's physical windows, good old-fashioned transparent aluminum. Thank God those still worked when everything else failed. We could see it happening. Space was tearing. Not like a wormhole, which at least maintained some kind of structural integrity. Not like any known spatial phenomenon that could be explained with math and physics. This was a wound, a crack in the fabric of existence itself. And it was spreading, growing like a fracture across safety glass, branching out in patterns that hurt to look at. The edges weren't clean. They flickered, shifted, phased between visible and invisible. They showed glimpses of places that shouldn't exist, geometries that violated Euclidean space, colors that had no names because they exist outside the visible spectrum, depths that went on forever despite being paper-thin. Looking at them too long made your eyes water and your brain ache, like trying to solve an equation where all the numbers were replaced with philosophical concepts. "Oh shit," I whispered, and my voice recording implants caught it for posterity. "Oh shit is right," Marcus muttered, already running calculations on his device. His fingers flew over mechanical controls, spinning dials and flipping switches with the speed and precision of a concert pianist. Numbers appeared on small analog displays, readouts that made no sense to me, but clearly meant something to him. Something emerged from the tear. I can't describe it properly. My brain won't let me. Every time I try to remember the details, my mind just skips, like a corrupted memory file or a censored image. But I remember the feeling, pure, primal terror. The kind that evolution burned into every species' DNA over millions of years to keep them alive. The recognition that you're in the presence of predators so far above you on the food chain that you're not even prey. You're just incidental protein. It was big. Maybe the size of a shuttle. Maybe the size of the entire station. It kept changing, or maybe my perception kept failing, unable to hold on to a consistent image. It had appendages, or maybe those were sensory organs, or maybe they were mouths, or maybe they were all three at once, and my brain was just picking one interpretation to keep from breaking entirely. It made sounds that weren't sounds, vibrations that didn't travel through air, but somehow reached into your skull and rattled around like loose change in a can. Frequencies that bypassed your ears entirely and spoke directly to the most primitive parts of your brain, the parts that still remembered hiding in caves from things that hunted in the dark. The station's hull began to warp where the entity touched it, metal bending in impossible directions, forming angles that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Supports twisted into Mobius strips. Corridors folded into themselves. I watched the section of wall turn inside out without actually moving, revealing its interior structure while still maintaining its exterior position. Void entity, Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled fear. Class 4, based on spatial displacement and reality corruption index. Not the worst we've seen, but bad enough. This one's been trying to cross over for at least a week based on the degradation patterns. Probably sensed all the concentrated consciousness here. The summit were like a buffet to them. Thousands of sentient minds in one location. Bad enough. ZYXL managed to gasp, his voice distorted by the fractures in his crystalline structure. That thing's tearing the station apart just by existing near it. He was right. The station's hull was beginning to fail in sections, metal and composite materials simply ceasing to obey physical laws. Gravity was flickering. We'd float for a second, then slam back down with double force, then float again, then experience gravity from 3 different directions at once. The atmospheric containment fields were holding, but barely, and I could see shimmers where reality was too thin to support them much longer. All around us, delegates were panicking. The Corvette tried to activate their brand-new quantum disruptor cannons, but the weapons just sat there dead, their displays blank, their power cells unresponsive. The Silvari attempted to generate gravity wells to contain the entity, but their palm-sized devices were useless, the microsingularities refusing to form. Even the THRNN's neural links had failed, leaving them confused and separate for the first time in their adult lives. 40 individuals suddenly alone in their own heads, crying out in distress. Only Marcus's device was still functioning. He'd set it down on the podium and was making final adjustments, his face set in concentration. The organic core was pulsing faster now, and the crystalline circuits were glowing with a light that seemed to exist outside the normal spectrum. Colors that shouldn't exist, wavelengths that made no sense. This is going to get loud, he warned, his voice carrying despite the chaos. And weird, really weird. Cover your ears if you have them. Close your eyes if you can. Don't try to process what you're about to see, because your brains won't handle it. Just look away and wait for it to be over. What are you going to do? Draxel demanded, and for the first time since I'd known him, the mighty Corvette commander sounded afraid. Marcus's expression hardened into something between determination and resignation. What my family's been doing for 400 years, he replied. What my great-grandmother did when the first breach opened over New Beijing. What my grandfather did during the Mars colony incident. What my father did 6 times before it finally killed him. I'm going to tell that thing to fuck off back to wherever it came from. He pulled a lever on the side of the device, and the universe changed. The sound that emerged wasn't really a sound. It was more like reality remembering how to be reality. A fundamental frequency that everything else existed in relation to, the base note of existence itself, finally being played after silence. I felt it in my bones, in my blood, in the quantum spin of the atoms that made up my body. It resonated with something deep inside me, something I didn't know existed until that moment. The basic agreement my particles had made with the universe to stay coherent, to maintain their bonds, to exist as me rather than just random matter scattered across space-time. The device was singing, if you could call it that, a resonance that spread outward in visible waves, distorting the air, bending light, rippling through space itself like dropping a stone into still water. Where those waves touched the void entity, it recoiled, its form becoming more defined, more solid, more real, and clearly hating every second of it. The entity shrieked, and this time was an actual sound that our ears could process. It was a sound of something being forced from a place it wanted to be into a place it absolutely didn't, like dragging a deep-sea creature onto dry land, like forcing a being of pure energy into physical form, like making something that existed across infinite dimensions suddenly obey 3-dimensional rules. The tear in space began to close, reality knitting itself back together, like a wound healing in fast-forward. The edges stopped flickering, stopped showing impossible vistas. The fractures in space-time sealed themselves, each one disappearing with a small pop of displaced energy. But the entity wasn't going quietly. It thrashed its appendages, and I could see them clearly now, forced into shapes my brain could process, lashing out wildly. They struck the station's hull, tearing through reinforced metal like tissue paper. Alarms blared. Physical, mechanical alarms that still worked when digital systems failed. Sections of the station began decompressing, atmospheric shields failing under the assault. Marcus made another adjustment, his face pale with effort, and the resonance changed pitch. Got deeper, more insistent, more authoritative. The waves coming from his device turned from visible distortions into something else. Solid barriers of crystallized space-time that pushed against the entity like physical walls, forcing it back toward the shrinking tier. "Come on," Marcus muttered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the station's cooling systems. "Come on, you bastard. I've done this dance before. Back you go. Not today. Not ever. You don't belong here." The entity made one final attempt to stay, trying to anchor itself to our reality by wrapping around a section of the station's outer ring. The metal groaned under impossible stress. I heard structural support snapping, saw entire modules beginning to break away. Then Marcus cranked the device to maximum output. The resonance became overwhelming, transcending sound and entering the realm of pure physical force. I could feel it in every cell of my body, a vibration so fundamental it felt like it was rewriting my atomic structure. Reality itself was asserting its dominance, rejecting the foreign intrusion with absolute, uncompromising authority. The entity lost its grip. For one horrible moment, it seemed to expand, growing larger and more diffuse, like it was trying to spread itself thin enough to stay. Then the resonance hit a harmonic peak, and the entity was sucked back to the tear like water down a drain, its shriek of rage and frustration echoing across dimensions we couldn't even perceive. The tear sealed behind it with a flash of light that left after images in colors that didn't exist, and then it was gone. Reality snapped back into place with an almost audible click, like a dislocated joint being reset. Then silence. Real silence this time. Digital systems began rebooting, screens flickering back to life in sequence. Gravity stabilized, settling into its normal, comfortable pull. The station's AI came back online, immediately launching into damage reports and emergency protocols with the cheerful obliviousness of a program that had no memory of being unconscious. Marcus slumped against the podium, his device powering down. The glow faded from its circuits. The organic core settled back into its neutral state, its breathing slowing to a resting rhythm. He looked exhausted, like he'd just run a marathon while doing calculus and fighting off an army. His hands were shaking now, not from effort, but from adrenaline crash. Nobody laughed now. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the mechanical wheeze of the station's emergency repairs activating, drones deploying to patch hull breaches, force fields snapping into place over damaged sections. Draxel approached slowly, his earlier arrogance completely gone. His scales had lost their lustrous sheen, turned dull and matte with shock. He stared at the device, then at Marcus, then at the sealed section of space where the tear had been, then back to Marcus. "You've been dealing with these things for 4 centuries?" His voice was barely above a whisper, rough and uncertain. 6, actually, Marcus corrected, carefully packing his device back into the briefcase with hands that still trembled slightly. The first recorded void incursion was in 2187, during the early Mars colonies. 3,000 colonists killed in 47 minutes before we even understood what was happening. My great-great-great-great-grandmother, Dr. Sarah Webb, was part of the disaster response team. She was a physicist studying exotic matter states when the breach opened. She watched her entire research station get torn apart by something that shouldn't exist. He closed his eyes for a moment, and I realized he was seeing it, not through his own eyes, but through family memory passed down through generations. She spent the next 20 years of her life figuring out what had happened and how to prevent it from happening again. Her daughter, my great-great-great-grandmother, Dr. Elena Webb, figured out how to detect the breaches before they fully opened. Her son, my great-great-grandfather, Colonel James Webb, weaponized the detection system, turned it into something that could push them back. We've been refining the technology ever since, passing it down through families who understand that some threats can't be fought with conventional weapons, that some responsibilities don't come with recognition or reward, they just come with the absolute necessity of someone doing them. Why didn't you tell us? I found myself asking, my voice sounding strange to my own audio receptors. Why keep this secret? Why not warn the entire galaxy? Marcus looked at me with those tired, old beyond their years eyes. Would you have believed us? Before today, I mean, before you saw it with your own sensors. He gestured at the crowd of shocked, silent delegates. We've tried telling other species, submitted reports to the Federation Council, provided data, sensor logs, survivor testimonies, everything. Want to know what we got back? He pulled out another data chip from his jacket, this one pristine and new. Official response from the Federation Science Council, received 3 years ago. The phenomena described in your reports are inconsistent with established physical laws and likely represent misinterpretation of natural stellar events. We recommend psychological evaluation for affected personnel and suggest redirecting research funding toward proven defensive technologies. That's a direct quote. He tossed the chip onto the podium where it clattered and spun. Polite dismissals. Suggestions that we were misinterpreting natural phenomena. Recommendations for psychological evaluation. One Silvari scientist told me we were experiencing collective delusion brought on by isolation stress. A Corvid military advisor suggested our detection equipment was picking up echoes of our own FTL drives and we were chasing ghosts. The THRYNN collective sent back a 40-page analysis proving mathematically that void entities couldn't exist because they violated the fundamental coherence principle. His voice grew harder, edged with old bitterness. So we stopped trying to convince anyone. We just kept doing our job, kept building our devices, training our people, maintaining the watch. Because someone had to. Because those things don't care if you believe in them or not. They'll kill you just the same. And if the rest of the galaxy wanted to laugh at our primitive technology and call us paranoid, fine. As long as we could keep doing what needed to be done, we'd swallow the mockery. Pride's a luxury you can't afford when extinction's the alternative. The silence that followed was profound and profoundly uncomfortable. I found myself reviewing everything I'd ever written about humanity, every dismissive comment, every joke about their technological nostalgia. How many other species had done the same? How many times have we mocked the very people standing between us and annihilation? How many? ZYX asked, his voice distorted by the cracks still running through his crystalline structure. How many of these incidents have occurred? Marcus pulled up a display on his personal device, a ruggedized tablet that looked like it could survive being used as a hammer. The screen showed a star chart with red markers scattered across human-occupied space. 17 major breaches in the past 60 years. Class 3 or higher, capable of producing entities that could devastate entire colonies if left unchecked. Hundreds of minor incursions, Class 1 and 2, things that slip through microfractures and only last minutes before reality corrects itself. We've managed to contain them all, push them back before they could spread beyond the immediate area. Total confirmed casualties across all incidents, approximately 470,000. Total estimated casualties if we hadn't intervened, somewhere between 3 and 5 billion, based on population density in affected areas. He let that sink in for a moment, but they're getting more frequent. The intervals between breaches are shortening. 10 years ago, we'd see maybe one major breach every 2 years. 5 years ago, it dropped to one every 18 months. This year, we've had 3 already, and it's only October. Whatever's on the other side, it's getting better at finding ways through. The barriers between dimensions are weakening, or they're getting smarter, or both. We don't know which, and that terrifies us. The implications hung in the air like a guillotine blade, visible to everyone and impossible to ignore. You said families, plural, Draxel noted, his military training reasserting itself as he focused on tactical details. There are more of you, more people with these devices. About 40 families across human space, Marcus confirmed. Maybe 200 individuals actively trained and equipped at any given time. Not nearly enough if the breaches keep accelerating at the current rate. The training takes years. You need to understand both the technical aspects and let's call it spiritual preparation. You're interfacing with something that exists outside normal reality. If your mind isn't ready for that, the device can't protect you. We've lost people who rushed through training, thought they were ready when they weren't. The entities can sense weakness, exploit doubt. You need absolute certainty or you become a door instead of a wall. He looked around the exhibition hall, at all the sophisticated weapons and defense systems that have been rendered completely useless by the entity's mere presence. This is why we're here. Not to show off, not to compete, to warn you, because the next breach might not be near a human colony. It might be near one of yours. And when your digital systems crash, when your quantum computers can't process what they're seeing, when your AI goes into recursive failure loops trying to understand impossible data, you're going to need something that works on principles older than computation. Something that doesn't try to understand, just responds. Something that can push back against things that exist outside the rules you've built your entire civilization on. The THRYNN scientists who'd admired the device earlier stepped forward, their neural link flickering as 40 minds struggled to process what they'd witnessed. The hybrid state matter, they said, their voice tight with barely controlled excitement. The construction methodology, the resonance principles. You'd be willing to share this? Teach others? We've been trying to share it for 3 decades, Marcus replied with a bitter smile. But yeah, now that you've seen what it's for, maybe you'll actually listen. Maybe you'll take it seriously instead of filing it under quaint human superstitions and forgetting about it. He pulled out a larger data storage device from his briefcase, this one looking considerably more advanced than the chips he'd been tossing around. This contains everything. Complete construction specifications, training protocols, theoretical frameworks, incident reports, tactical response procedures, meditation techniques for mental preparation. Everything 6 generations of my family learned the hard way. Fair warning, though. The training program is brutal. The success rate is low, and you'll spend the rest of your life standing watch against something most people will never see or believe in. When you do stop a breach, nobody will thank you because they won't understand what you prevented. You'll be the weird person with the antique device who insists on maintaining vigilance against threats that don't exist. You'll be mocked, dismissed, maybe even ostracized by your own people who think you're wasting your life on paranoid delusions. Sounds like my kind of job, rumbled a Corvus warrior I hadn't noticed approaching. Younger than Draxel, maybe 50 cycles old, with fresh battle scars across his scales. Where do I sign up? More delegates stepped forward. The Sylvari scientists who'd analyzed the device. 3 THRYNN who'd separated from their collective specifically to volunteer. A Grax merchant who'd lost family in what human reports had classified as a void incident, but Federation records had listed as unexplained spatial anomaly. Even some of the more skeptical species, the ones who'd been laughing hardest just minutes before, were approaching the podium with questions. Draxel was still staring at the briefcase, at the device inside it that had just saved all our lives. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, stripped of all arrogance. I owe you an apology, Dr. Webb. A significant one. I mocked you, dismissed your warnings, treated you like a primitive playing with toys he didn't understand. I was wrong. Catastrophically, dangerously wrong. Keep it, Marcus said, not unkindly. His expression had softened slightly, recognizing genuine contrition when he saw it. Just help us prepare. Because that thing we just pushed back, that was relatively small. The big ones. He trailed off, his expression darkening with remembered horror. Let's just say there's a reason my family's been doing this for 6 centuries. There's a reason we keep building these devices, even when the success rate is 1 in 50. There's a reason we train our children from age 6 to recognize the signs of a breach. Someone's got to hold the line. And if nobody else believed the line existed, we'd hold it alone. But now you know. Now you've seen. So maybe we don't have to carry this burden by ourselves anymore. 3 months later. The Federation Council's emergency session had been going for 6 hours, and tempers were running hot. The economic impact alone is staggering, argued the Vortian Trade Minister, their gas-sack body pulsing with agitation. Every ship, every station, every colony now requires one of these RDSA devices as a backup system. Do you understand the manufacturing costs, the resource allocation, the training infrastructure? Do you understand the alternative? Marcus shot back from his position at the advisory panel. We've had 4 more breaches in the past 3 months. 4. That's more than we typically see in a year. The frequency is accelerating exactly as we predicted it would. Without detection and response capability in place, we're looking at potential casualties in the billions. Potential casualties from a threat most species still don't fully accept, the Trade Minister countered. Half the Federation still thinks the Nexus Station incident was some kind of mass hallucination or human propaganda. Then they're idiots, Draxel growled from his seat. The Corvus commander had become one of the Void Defense Initiative's strongest advocates after Nexus Station. I was there. I saw it. I felt my weapons fail, watched my technology become useless, nearly died when reality itself started coming apart. Anyone who dismisses that as hallucination can volunteer to stand unprotected during the next breach. See how their skepticism holds up when an entity tries to eat their consciousness. I was covering the session for the Interstellar Military Review, and I'd never seen the Council this divided. The vote to establish the Void Defense Initiative had passed, but implementation was proving nightmarish. Cultural differences, technological incompatibilities, training difficulties, and the simple fact that half the galaxy still didn't really believe the threat was real. But some of us did. I'd spent the past 3 months embedded with the Human Resonance Corps, documenting their operations for a special series. I'd watched Marcus and others like him respond to 3 separate breaches. I'd seen things that still gave me nightmares, witnessed horrors that my editors had refused to publish because they were too disturbing for general readership. I'd also witnessed the first successful construction of an RDSA by a non-human, a young Sylvari named Crystal, who'd spent 6 weeks in isolation learning to work without observation, trusting in faith rather than measurement. When the chamber had opened to reveal a functioning device, 47 people had cheered. Crystal had wept, their crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns of joy. The council recognizes Dr. Webb, the session moderator announced, and Marcus stood, looking exhausted. He'd been traveling nonstop between training facilities, responding to breaches, and attending these political sessions. His face had gained new lines, his hair had gotten grayer, but his eyes still held that same quiet determination. 3 months ago, this council didn't believe void entities existed, he began, his voice carrying across the chamber. Now we're arguing about the cost of defense against them. That's progress, I suppose. But let me make something very clear. This isn't optional. This isn't a luxury we can choose to afford or not afford. This is survival. The breaches aren't stopping. They're increasing. And every time we fail to respond, people die. Horribly. He pulled up a holographic display showing recent breach locations. Last week, a Class 3 entity emerged near the THRYN colony on Betarax 4. Response time, 43 minutes. Casualties, 712. A human team with 3 RDSAs managed to contain and banish it before it could reach the colony proper. Without that response, casualty estimates were in the hundreds of thousands. The week before that, a Class 2 breach on the trade station Meridian. 7 killed 40 people before our team arrived. The week before that. We understand the threat, Dr. Webb, the moderator interrupted. The question is resource allocation, and the question is survival. Marcus cut him off, his voice sharp. Every species in this chamber needs to decide right now whether they're willing to invest in defense against something they don't fully understand, or they'd rather save money and hope the next breach happens somewhere else. Because hope isn't a strategy. Hope doesn't close dimensional tiers. Hope doesn't push entities back to where they came from. He gestured to the display, where red markers continued multiplying across the star chart. We're at a tipping point. Either we build a real defense network, enough devices, enough trained operatives, enough response capability to cover Federation space, or we wait for a Class 5 entity to emerge in a populated system and watch billions die while our digital systems crash and our conventional weapons fail. Those are the options. Everything else is just details. The session ended without a final vote, but the tide had turned. I could see it in the delegates' faces, hear it in the tone of their arguments. Fear was overcoming skepticism. Survival instinct was beating budget concerns. 6 months after Nexus Station. I'm writing this report from the first official Void defense training facility, established jointly by the Federation and Humanity's Resonance Corps. The facility is located on a moon in neutral space, deliberately isolated, deliberately far from populated areas, for obvious reasons. 73 delegates from 32 species are here, learning to build, operate, and maintain RDSAs under the guidance of human instructors. The success rate for device construction has improved to 1 in 37, thanks to THRYN neural analysis of the process and Sylvari contributions to material stability. Not great, but better than it was. The Corvith have provided military structure and discipline to the training program, barracks, training schedules, tactical protocols. They've also contributed their elite warriors to response teams, soldiers who understand that sometimes the enemy doesn't play by any rules you've ever encountered. The Sylvaria developed new theoretical frameworks for understanding void physics without relying on digital processing. They've created analog computational methods that can handle impossible mathematics, ways of calculating with crystal harmonics instead of binary logic. Even ZYXL's people have gotten involved, their crystalline bodies proving surprisingly well-suited to interfacing with hybrid state matter. They can resonate with the RDSA cores in ways organic beings can't, amplifying the device's effectiveness. Marcus Webb is the program's technical director, though he spends most of his time in the field responding to incidents. There have been 9 more breaches in the past 6 months, 5 near human colonies, 3 in neutral space, and 1 that opened right next to a Corvith military station. All of them were contained, not without cost. We've lost 12 operatives, 3 humans for Corvith, 2 Sylvari, 1 THRYN collective mind group, and 2 Grax. They died holding the line, buying time for evacuations, pushing entities back through tiers that were too large, too powerful, too hungry. Their names are inscribed on a memorial wall in the training facility's main hall. Every new trainee sees them. Every graduate adds their oath beneath those names. I interviewed Marcus last week, for a follow-up article. He was cleaning his device after a training exercise, his hands moving with the automatic precision of someone who performed the same task thousands of times. Do you feel vindicated now? I asked him. Now that everyone believes you, now that the Federation's mobilizing resources, now that you're not carrying this burden alone anymore. He paused, his hand stilling on the device's surface. Vindication doesn't matter, he said finally. What matters is that we're not alone anymore. For 6 centuries, human families carried this burden by themselves. Watched breaches open, fought entities, saved lives, and never got recognition because nobody believed the threat was real. My great-great-great-grandmother died pushing back a Class 4 entity that would have consumed the entire Mars colony. History records it as a reactor malfunction. My grandfather survived 37 breaches before one finally killed him. His obituary said he died in an industrial accident. My father made it to 42 before his luck ran out. He resumed cleaning, his expression distant. Now we got Corvus warriors standing watch. Sylvari scientists developing new detection methods. THRYNN collectives adapting their neural links to improve response coordination. The burden is shared. That's not vindication. That's just good sense. That's survival. You ever regret it? I asked. Spending your life fighting threats nobody else even knew existed? Missing out on normal life, normal relationships, normal careers. He thought about that for a while, his hands still working mechanically on the device. My great-grandmother used to say that the hardest part wasn't the fighting. It wasn't the fear or the danger or even the deaths. The hardest part was knowing that if we did our jobs right, nobody would ever know how close they came to annihilation. We'd save billions of lives, and those billions would just go on with their day, completely unaware. No parades, no medals, no recognition. Just the quiet satisfaction of a job done right, and another day bought for humanity. He looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't noticed before. Not bitterness, not resentment, but a kind of peace. She also said that was okay. That recognition wasn't the point. The point was survival. The point was standing between the darkness and everyone you loved, everyone you'd never meet, everyone who'd come after you, making sure they had a future, even if they never knew you gave it to them. He went back to his work, and I let him be. As I write this, I can see through the facility's windows. 3 teams are practicing device operation under simulated breach conditions. A Corvus instructor is demonstrating proper resonance tuning to a mixed group of students. In the fabrication bay, a THRYNN human team just successfully constructed their 8th RDSA in a row, a new record. And somewhere out there in the black, reality continues to hold together because people are standing watch with devices that look like antiques but work like miracles. 1 year after Nexus Station, the emergency beacon went off at 0347 station time, dragging me from the first decent sleep I'd had in a week. Class 5 breach, the alert system announced in its maddeningly calm voice. Location, Civilian Orbital Station Harmony 2, Deneb system. Population, 400,000. Response teams Alpha, Beta, and Gamma are deploying. All personnel to emergency stations. Class 5, the worst classification. The kind of breach that produced entities capable of consuming entire space stations, corrupting reality in kilometers-wide radius, existing simultaneously in multiple dimensions. We'd never successfully contained a Class 5 before. I grabbed my recording equipment and ran for command center, my journalistic instincts overriding my terror. This was the nightmare scenario we'd all been preparing for, the breach that would test whether everything we'd built over the past year was enough. The command center was chaos organized by discipline. Displays showed the breach location, response team trajectories, evacuation progress. Marcus was at the central console, his device already active, coordinating with the 3 teams en route. Team Alpha ETA 7 minutes, reported Commander Draxel from his ship. Reading massive spatial distortion. Reality integrity at 43% and dropping. This is bad, Webb. This is really bad. I know, Marcus replied, his voice tight. Team Beta, what's your status? 6 minutes out, responded Crystal, the Sylvari operator. My device is reading resonance patterns I've never seen before. This entity is huge. Multiple dimensional anchors. I don't think we can banish this one Marcus. We might only be able to contain it. Then we contain it until evacuation completes. For 100,000 people, we hold that line no matter what. The visual feed from Harmony 2 came online, and everyone in the command center went silent. The entity that had emerged from the breach was like nothing we'd encountered before. It was approximately the size of a small moon, existing in what appeared to be 5 dimensions simultaneously. Where it touched the station, reality simply ceased. Not destroyed, erased. Sections of the station were vanishing into impossible geometries, being consumed by something that existed in spaces between spaces. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "Team Alpha arriving now," Draxel reported. "Beginning resonance sweep. All units, activate your devices on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark." Through the feed, I watched 5 RDSAs activate simultaneously, their combined resonance creating a barrier of crystallized reality around the station. The entity recoiled from it, its form becoming more defined, more solid, and more angry. It lashed out, appendages that existed in more than 3 dimensions striking the barrier. The resonance field held, but barely. I could see the operators straining, their devices glowing white-hot with the effort of maintaining the frequency. "Team Beta arriving," cries that reported. "Adding our resonance to the barrier. Harmonizing frequencies, now." 3 more devices activated, their resonance interweaving with Team Alpha's. The barrier strengthened, pushing the entity back meters at a time. But it wasn't enough. The entity was too large, too powerful, too real despite being impossible. "Evacuation progress?" Marcus demanded. 47% evacuated, someone reported. 200,000 still on station. "Team Gamma, TA?" "For minutes," responded a human voice I didn't recognize. "But Marcus, the resonance readings, this thing is anchored too deeply. We're not going to be able to banish it. Not with what we have." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, and I saw him make a decision that aged him 10 years in an instant. "All teams, maintain containment. Keep that barrier up no matter what. I'm coming in with the resonator." The command center erupted in protests. "The resonator hasn't been tested in field conditions," someone objected. "The power requirements alone could kill you. It's experimental," Draxel growled. "We don't even know if it works." "Then I guess we're about to find out," Marcus replied, already moving toward the equipment bay. "Because that's 400,000 people who'll die if we don't try." I followed him, recording everything, because that's what I do. I document. I bear witness. The resonator was humanity's secret weapon, an RDSA scaled up to capital ship size, powered by a fusion core and equipped with neural amplifiers that would let one operator channel enough resonance to banish a Class 5 entity. Theoretically, the side effects were unknown. The survival rate was probably 0, but it was the only chance those 400,000 people had. Marcus climbed into the resonator's control cradle, a seat surrounded by more of that hybrid state matter, more organic neural tissue, more impossible technology that looked like it belonged in a museum and a nightmare simultaneously. "Marcus," I said, my voice sounding strange even to myself, "you don't have to do this. Send someone else. You're too valuable." "There is no one else," he interrupted, strapping himself in. "I'm the only operator with enough experience to handle the power load. My family has been preparing for this for 6 generations. Every breach, every battle, every loss, it all led here, to this moment, to me being the one who can make a difference." He looked at me, and I saw no fear in his eyes, just determination and acceptance. "Document this, Vex Store, make sure people know. Make sure they understand that the price of survival is sometimes paid by people who won't live to see what they've saved." The resonator powered up, and the sound of it was like the universe remembering how to sing. Marcus's ship accelerated toward harmony. 2, toward an entity that could unmake reality. Toward a fight that would either save 400,000 lives or add one more name to the memorial wall. Through the tactical feed, I watched as the resonator engaged. The resonance it produced wasn't like the individual devices. It was fundamental, absolute, a frequency that reality itself had to obey. The entity recoiled from it, thrashing in what might have been pain or rage or fear. The other teams pulled back, maintaining the containment barrier, while Marcus pushed forward. The resonator's field expanding, contracting, adapting to the entity's movements. He was fighting it on levels I couldn't comprehend, in dimensions my brain couldn't process, forcing something that existed everywhere to exist nowhere near the station. 97% evacuated, someone reported. 3 minutes to completion. The entity made one final attempt to reach the station, throwing its entire mass against the resonator's field. I watched Marcus's vital signs spike to dangerous levels, watched the power output redline, watched the neural load exceed every safety threshold. But the field held. The entity was pushed back, inch by impossible inch, toward the breach it had emerged from. Reality reasserted itself around the station, the impossible geometries unfolding back into normal space, the erased sections rematerializing as the entity's influence withdrew. Evacuation complete, came the report. All personnel accounted for. Get him out of there. But Marcus wasn't done. The entity was at the breach, but it was resisting, trying to anchor itself to our dimension. So Marcus followed it through. Webb, what are you doing? Draxol shouted. Making sure it doesn't come back, Marcus replied, his voice distorted by the power flowing through him. Making sure the breach seals permanently. Tell my family. Tell them I finished the job. The resonator disappeared into the breach, following the entity into whatever nightmare dimension it called home. For a moment, the resonance continued, audible across dimensions. Then the breach sealed with a flash of light that temporarily blinded every sensor pointed at it. When vision returned, the breach was gone. The entity was gone. Marcus Webb was gone. The command center sat in stunned silence. 100,000 people had just been saved. The price was one man who'd spent his entire life preparing to pay it. Epilogue. 5 years later. The memorial wall in the Void Defense Training Facility has gotten longer. 93 names now from 27 different species. 93 people who stood between darkness and civilization, who paid the price so others could live. Marcus Webb's name is at the center, larger than the others, with a simple inscription beneath it. He held the line. The Void Defense Initiative is now fully integrated into Federation military structure. 300 active RDSAs deployed across Federation space, with 600 trained operators ready to respond. The breach frequency has stabilized. We're not sure if that's because we're getting better at sealing them or the entities are learning to be more careful. Probably both. The Human Resonance Corps still leads training and development, but they're no longer alone. Every species contributes now. The Corvith provide military discipline. The Sylvari advance the theoretical frameworks. The THRYNN coordinate multi-team responses. Even my own species, the Vexcari, have contributed. Our natural ability to perceive multiple timelines simultaneously helps predict breach locations. We're not just humanity's burden anymore. We're the galaxy's responsibility. And we remember, every year on the anniversary of the Harmony 2 incident, every Void Defense operator gathers at their local facility. We read the names on the memorial wall. We share stories of those who fell. We renew our commitment to hold the line. Because Marcus was right. Vindication doesn't matter. Recognition doesn't matter. What matters is survival. What matters is standing watch so others can sleep safely, can raise families, can build futures without knowing how close they came to losing everything. I spent 2 centuries as a military correspondent, documenting wars and conflicts across the galaxy. I thought I'd seen humanity at its best and worst. Thought I understood what made them special in the Federation. I was wrong. Humanity's gift to the galaxy wasn't their creativity or their adaptability or their fighting spirit. Though they have all of those in abundance, their gift was showing us that sometimes the greatest strength isn't in having the best weapons or the most advanced technology. Sometimes the greatest strength is in standing watch with an antique device, holding a line nobody else believes exists, fighting threats nobody else can see, and doing it not for glory or recognition, but because someone has to, because the alternative is unthinkable. I still keep the recording from that first day at Nexus Station, when we all laughed at Marcus Webb and his beaten-up briefcase. Sometimes I watch it to remind myself how wrong we were, how close we came to dismissing the very thing that would save us. And every time I watch it, I hear Marcus's words. Sometimes the old ways work just fine. He was right about that too. The galaxy owes humanity a debt it can never repay. But we can honor it. We can remember. We can hold the line as they taught us. And we can make damn sure nobody ever laughs at someone carrying an old briefcase and claiming they're protecting the universe. Because maybe, just maybe, they are.